Good morning. It's time for us to begin this morning in 1 Peter, of course, in just a minute. There's obviously a number of people for us to be going to God in prayer. Certainly thankful to have Nancy back with us, and definitely need to remember her. Some other things that she's going to have to deal with, procedures coming up. So remember her. She continues to go through those, but as of today, we're so thankful that she's able to be out. Make sure that you tell her hi if you have an opportunity. Is there? Remember the Bryant's? They're traveling down to Tennessee, I believe, where his cousin had passed away, and they're having the service. So please remember Gary and Diane as they are traveling. And then obviously just a number of people that are dealing with chronic issues need to remember Tech Payne. He's doing fairly well. But he'll be starting up his treatments again. This week is the hope. So please remember him if you would. Is there anyone else anyone like to mention? All right. As always, if you have something, make sure that you let it be known and we'll announce it later. But if you would, please bow with me at this time. Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful, dear Father, for this opportunity we have to come out to worship you. We are so thankful for your Son and his willingness to die for us, to give us the opportunity to be your children. We're so thankful for his example while he was here and how to be humble and compassionate for others. We ask, dear Father, that we will continue to grow in those areas and that we will look for those opportunities to help one another. We are so thankful, dear Father, for this family here, and we ask that you be with all of us, that we will continue to strive closer to you, and as we do so, that we'll draw closer to one another. We ask, your Father, that you would be with those that are sick, and those that are mourning the loss of loved ones, those that are just going through various difficulties in this life. We ask that you would be with them, and that you'll be with us, dear Father, as we go through this life, that we will shine our lights, that other people will see you, and that they will desire to have a relationship with you as well. And it's through your Son's name we pray. Amen. All right, 1 Peter we started on Wednesday. And ultimately, what I want you to notice as we go through this book is the idea of temporary versus eternal. It's the issue that he is going to be talking about a lot. Whether or not you're going to focus on the temporary issues that you go through, or you're going to have an eternal focus. And that's why he's going to use Jesus, obviously, as the great example of anything that we go through. But here in this book specifically, how he went through suffering and how he was willing to go through the suffering. He uses in the beginning of this book the perspective of having great joy. And why do we have great joy? Well, it's because of everything God has done for us. And so he talks about the inheritance and just so many different things, ultimately talking about salvation that we have. However, you do have in the midst of this even though phrase. Even though you're going to go through various trials right now. And so even though you're going through present difficulties, remember what God has done for you, and make sure you're thinking about the future home, that this is an eternal perspective that we have as we're striving to serve him. And that's where we ended on Wednesday, talking about this obtaining as the outcome in verse 9, your faith, the salvation of your souls. The whole point of this is this relationship we have with God here on earth that ultimately continues through eternity. The opportunity, again, for us to be with him. And so we made mention as we begin this morning of these verses. So verses 10 through 12, you have such an interesting perspective given here. This amazing background of what was going on with the prophets. And he says the angels. And so you have these amazing prophecies that are mentioned. And in verse 10 he says, as to this salvation, the prophets who prophesied of the grace that would come to you made careful searches and inquiries, seeking to know what person or time the Spirit of Christ within them was indicating as he predicted the suffering of Christ and the glories to follow. It was revealed to them that they were not serving themselves, but you, and these things which now have been announced to you through those who preach the gospel to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, things into which angels long to look. You think about it from the prophet's perspective. They are writing about the amazing blessings that are found in the Messiah. Why were they willing to go through all the difficulties, the persecutions, the sufferings that they went through. Why were they willing to do that? Yeah, they believed in what was coming. They understood as God would talk to them, depending on which prophet we're talking about, that he was with them the whole time. And so it's an amazing thing for them to take a step back and say, when are these things going to happen? Isaiah, as we talked about on Wednesday, Isaiah writing Isaiah 53 and talking about the suffering servant. When is this one coming? When is this going to happen? All of them thinking about those things. And you think about it from that perspective, that we have beyond comprehension these amazing blessings that we're given. And we know the rest of the story. How much more should we be willing to go through difficulties in this life because of what God has done for us? This is why they wrote those things that they wrote. When is this going to happen? You know the amazing thing about that is? We have the answer to that. We know that. Why? Because as he says here, it was written for you, for them in the first century, and then we're blessed to be able to read it now. And so we know the rest of the story. So when we're going through difficulties or we're going through things in this life, we're able to have this exact same attitude that we're reading about here because of God, because of what he has done, and because of this amazing salvation that they wrote about and that we're blessed to be able to read and understand as ours. It's an amazing thing. The struggle is making the application when you're going through the trials. You can read it. We're all reading it. But when you're going through the trials, taking the step back and counting the blessings that I have can be a difficult task. Or just focusing on those things can be difficult. Or going through the things that I'm going through with God and making sure that I have that attitude of focusing on him when I'm going through them is something that you grow. You continue to learn in that relationship that we have with him. So it's an opportunity for every single one of us to grow. And so why I bring that up is because there can be people in here that like, you know what, I struggle with that. You're not alone in that. That's why Peter's writing this, because it can be a struggle. And it's a reminder to us, and he'll talk about this later. I'm reminding you, I have no trouble reminding you of these things, because it's so important. This is why you go through these things. This is why we are willing to go through these things, because of what God has done for us. So, any thoughts, comments before we move on from this point? This is an amazing salvation. This is, just tremendous to think about. So even in the midst of these persecutions that they are going to suffer, there's nothing compared to the salvation that has been offered. However, there is an important point for us to understand, and it's given in verse 13. So that word that is used, at least in the New American Standard, the first word is what? Therefore. So it's not forget everything we just talked about, okay? You need to remember your blessings. You need to remember everything that God has done for you. You need to remember your salvation. Therefore, he tells us in verse 13, what do I need to do? What's the action words here? Karen?
Prepare your mind.
Prepare? Yes. So there's parts now that we talk about from God's perspective. God's going to do what he does. He's keeping those promises that he's made. But you come to this verse and you get some really important points that we have to do. We need to do. I need to prepare my mind for action. And we're going to break these down in just a second. I need to prepare it. I need to make sure I'm keeping sober in spirit, that I'm working on, yours might say, self-control. I am absolutely working on myself. I am keeping sober in the spirit. And I'm fixing my hope. I am focusing on what I need to focus on. Okay? So it's to prepare, to keep, the fix. This reminds me so much of Philippians chapter. I mean, you have Philippians 4, and it's leading up to, you give him all your anxiety, you pray to him, you give it to him. That's not where it starts. It starts before that when he's talking about you need to continue to understand that the Lord is there, that you're living that life with him, you're focusing on him, and continuing to grow. Then I'm able to give him anxiety. Why? Because I trust him. It's that relationship piece that is so important. Sean, do you? It's one of the things hopefully you've seen in the book of James and already in Peter is that it's not saying if you go through trials. It's when you go through trials. You're going to go through trials. That's not the issue. And so we're going to go through them. The preparing part of it is so important. You might say, wow, my life right now is going really, really well at this moment. Don't take the time off. It's not vacation. Prepare yourself. Make sure you're continuing to grow. You're focusing on the things that you need to focus on. And when we're talking about preparing our mind for action, we're talking about growing closer to God, working on the relationship of Him and the trust of Him, that I'm able to go through anything in this life, no matter what it is, good or bad, that I'm going through it with the correct attitude, understanding who He is, humility, all those things that we've been talking about that fit into this. It's always a growth opportunity for us to continue in this life. Rachel?
The New American Standard says, gird your mind, or gird the loins of your mind. And that's a military reference, so it's, to me, that helps me focus on, this is a battle. And so we have to prepare for battle. We're not just making preparations, we are preparing for battle, and your mind has to be separate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the dangers that we can fall into so quickly, thinking it's peacetime. It's always a war. The closer that you are to God, obviously, the more important that is. You draw near to Him, Satan's going to flee. But the idea for us is if you take your mind off of your relationship with God and you're not working on your relationship with God, that enemy is absolutely there. And he absolutely knows the choices that you're making at that moment. I am not growing closer to God. That's the one. He's going to talk about this later on in this book. He's the weak one. That's the one I'm going to go after. I'm going to go after that one. And that's the danger. And so it's paramount for us to continue to grow closer to Him. You must prepare your minds for action and when it comes to this war. Sonny?
In Matthew, Jesus said the lamp of the body is the eye. If the eye is clear, then the whole body will be full of light. But if the light that is in you is darkness, then how great is that darkness? Proverbs 4:23 says, watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the issues of life, or the springs of life. And so, when God tells us in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, fixing your eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith, finding Him in the moment is paramount. But what we often do, I'm saying what I often do, is I try to find Him a little too late. But it's in the very early stages of the storm is when I have to seek Him out. And that comes by way of practice. And it says over in Hebrews, in chapter 5, I believe it is, having through practice they have their senses trained to recognize both good and evil. And so as I practice focusing on Jesus, when the storm is not there, the greater the likelihood that in those moments my heart will turn to Him first, and then I can respond according to the storm, not in a panic, not through anxiety, but through reality of His presence.
Yeah. It's such an important piece. So even from the perspective of, you don't even have to wait till you see the storm clouds. I'm in the boat with Jesus the whole time. Like that's the key for us. It's not about waiting so I see a cloud. When it's sunny out, I'm with Jesus. When it's a little cloudy, I'm with Jesus. When it's very cloudy, I'm with Jesus. And obviously the storms. And so it's every single moment of my life that I am preparing my mind for action. It is a war. It is absolutely a war. Now, the question isn't who's going to win. We know who wins. The question is, do I want to be a victor or not? Do I want to be on the winning team from that standpoint? That's my choice. That's your choice. And so you prepare your mind for action. You keep sober in the spirit, meaning don't stop watching. Don't stop being alert. Make sure you're continuing to focus on the things you need to focus on, as he says, fixing your hope. And at least in the New American Standard, I love that it talks about in verse 13, fix your hope completely on the grace. You think about what our focus needs to be. A lot of times we like to break it into different pieces of our focus. This is completely on Jesus. That no matter what I go through in this life, it is with him in mind. That is an opportunity for all of us to continue to grow. And that's where he's going to go into next. So I need to prepare. I need to keep sober. I need to keep doing the things I need to do. Make sure that I'm in self-control. I have self-control and continuing to grow. And then I'm fixing my hope on him. That confidence that I have because of Jesus Christ. Because of that grace. Because of who he is. And he's going to take these 3 points and he's going to grow on them or add to them as we go forward in this book. But it's important for us to understand. A lot of times people will look and say, well, God has done all. He's done everything. He absolutely has. That doesn't change what I have to do or what you need to do. This is what we need to do. This is our end of the stick, if you will. This is our part of the story, of this relationship. And that's the part that we need to make sure that we are focusing on in this spiritual journey. Sean?
So the Boy Scout motto is be prepared, and thinking about your camping, just good weather, bad weather. That's a real kind of picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Boy Scouts stole that from the Bible. Always be prepared. 1 Peter. No, that's always a good thing that we always need to make sure we're doing. Yeah, it's important to point out to that. This is a subject you're going to see throughout the New Testament in particular. We can see it in the Old as well, but and for us, for the New Testament standpoint, 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5 as an example, the whole purpose is the day of the Lord's coming. It's coming. It's coming. What do I need to do? Well, you need to be ready. You need to be focused on what's coming. That's what he's saying here, too. It's the same thing. So you have this keeping sober. You need to make sure you're watching, alert, all those different words that help us understand that point, that this is about us being ready. It should not come on you as a surprise. And that's what he even says here when we talked earlier. Don't be surprised when fiery ordeals come over you. Or he'll talk about it in Peter. You think about it from that standpoint. Don't be surprised. I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen. And so for us, it's making the application of it. It's easy to read. The question is, have I prepared my mind for action? Am I keeping sober in spirit? And have I fixed my hope? That's the question, right? We all have to answer that. That's not, for one, all of us can just yell out something. This is every single one of us has to answer that question. And it's based on our actions and what we're doing. And so it's an important piece. I'm going to tell you, that fix your hope part only means something if you truly understand what hope is. You truly understand, we're not talking about a wish of any sort. This is absolutely understanding what God has said is going to happen. He is absolutely, through his grace, as he talks about in that verse, is going to do exactly what he has said. And we need to make sure that we are ready. Now, this goes on in verse 14. And what's the first way that he describes the children here?
Obedient children.
Obedient. This is highly important. Verse 13 tells us, obviously, our part of this. Verse 14, the question isn't whether or not some people, from this perspective or application, people can call themselves a child of God. The question is, are we obedient children of God? Are we actually children of God? Are we living the life of a child of God? And so he says, as obedient children, do not be conformed to the former lusts which were yours in your ignorance. Now, for us, when he talks about that, he's saying, don't go back to the old self. Don't go back. Those things that you did before, that old man, let it keep buried. Let it stay buried. It's not about bringing it back out and doing those things, not going back to those former lusts. You know what happens if you you're not preparing or you're not focusing on Jesus anymore? The temptation is you're going to go back to the old self. You're going to go back to the old thing that you served. Satan, as 1 John will talk about. It's going back to those things that we did. And so that's the danger. As obedient children, if I'm an obedient child of God, what that means is I am totally focused on Him. I am totally living that life. I am not, as Romans the 12th chapter in verse 1 and 2 will talk about, I'm not going to be conformed to this world. What I am going to be conformed to is Him. I am changing my relationship with this world from that standpoint, and I'm living for Him. I'm living for God because that's the new person that I am. That's the child of God that I'm striving to be. And so, verse 14, you can't go back. Matter of fact, what does verse 16 say? What do we need to become or continue to grow in?
Be holy because He is holy.
Holy. Holy. You think about just that word. We sing a song, holy, holy, holy. There's a reason why you say it 3 times. It's not just because it sounds good in the song, though some of you may think that's why. What else do I put in here? There's a reason for it. That's the perfect amount, the completeness of holiness. You'll see this in the scriptures. It's said 3 times. 666, as an example, is not because it's some weird number. It's failure upon failure upon failure. Okay, so there's understanding the differences of how the would be used in the scriptures is important. So here you have this holy word that is going to be used, and we're talking about the Holy One, the one who is absolutely, fully holy. He is the definition of holy. And I am striving, we're all striving to be like Him. Now, who makes us holy? God. He does. And so what I'm striving to do is become like who? Like Him. That's my job. That's my goal as I'm living this life, striving to be like Him. So in verse 15, but like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves also in all your behavior, because it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. That little phrase in verse 15, by the way, in all your behavior, seems to include everything. That's my understanding of that word all, by the way. And so that's the point that he's making. It's not asking you, are you trying to be holy on Sunday mornings? Well, good. Are you being holy in all your behavior? Are you being holy when things are bad, in the persecution that they were going through? That was a tremendous struggle in the first century that we know of, and it still is today. But there were different false views that were out there that would say you can keep it in your hearts and lie to the Roman government, as an example, to tell them that you don't believe in God, as long as you actually really do in your hearts. That way you're not going to be in trouble, nothing's going to happen, and everything's fine. They're not going to take away your children, they're not going to kill them, there's reasons why people would say, you know what, I don't want to tell them. But the reality is, that wasn't the correct manner of handling the situation. I'm to be holy as my God is holy in the things that I do. And so as he talks about here, in all our behavior. That is an amazing phrase. So when we talk about holiness, what exactly are we talking about? What does that mean? Set apart? Purity? Complete? Yep. Sanctification? There's a lot of those religious words that are very similar to each other. The idea of, in this case, we're talking about becoming like God. Becoming like Him in all that we do. What makes love such a profound thing? God does. What makes holiness this amazing thing? God does. It's Him. It's who He is. He's the definition of these things. And so thinking about it from that perspective, if I'm putting on Christ and I'm going to live the life or call myself a child of God, I'm striving to be like my Father in this situation, I'm going to be holy. I'm going to be striving to be like Him in all my behavior. That is a journey that we're on, and it's an opportunity for us to continue to grow closer to Him. But it's very similar to like Ephesians, the 5th chapter, where it talks about love your wife as Christ loved the church. That's an everyday, every second motivator, if you will. You're continuing to grow in those moments, continuing to grow in those relationships, and certainly with this one, it's the same. And so it's important for us to understand the big picture. Side note, verse 16 is quoted from Leviticus. It's used 3 times, I believe, that's used there. And the reality is there's a reason why Leviticus uses it those many times. You're talking about the old law, the purpose of the old law, the understanding of when you're worshiping or bowing down to God, you better be holy from that standpoint. And it's that understanding of who he is. When you are worshiping God, you are in the presence of the Holy One, as it calls him here. That is unbelievably important to remember as we are worshiping him anytime, but certainly as we're reading 1 Peter. It's a powerful, sobering statement. So, anybody else? Rachel?
Something I'm thinking about with 13 through 16 is the word our default. That if, when I was in my early 30s, I watched someone who was older losing fat and watched the default go from that filter to the past. And I made up my mind then that I was going to change my life so that if in sickness and health and whatever comes, the default is that kind person, not that angry person. And I think these verses speak directly to that holiness is what we're striving to replace the old self so that when we don't have control of the situation, our default is alive.
Yeah. Yeah. Be like him. And I think it's neat. Well, I know some others had their hands. I think it's neat as we continue on the description of God, the Father, as we go forward, because it's one thing to say I'm holy, I'm striving to be holy, and then he's going to talk about what that looks like and what he was willing to do. And again, you just, first of all, are just amazed at his love and what he has done for us. But it also makes us realize we have a lot of growing to do. We have a lot of opportunities to continue to grow, to continue to fix our mind on him. Kyle?
I also just think it's fascinating that he continues. He has so far in this chapter, but at the very beginning, the audience here is these Christians who are probably not Jews in the Asia Minor region, and he continues even using Leviticus. He is weaving in all of these, Jewish Old Testament concepts into describing to them that they are the elect. You were not born into this kingdom, but this is the actual fulfillment. You are reborn into this kingdom.
Yeah, it's neat. And we'll see this maybe not today, but we'll see this as we go forward in chapter 1. The continual plan. It's always talking about the plan, the foreknowledge of the plan. Just every time he talks about that. And so you think about the old law into the new law. This was always the plan. It was misunderstood, right? But the reality is this was the plan. It was going to be for the Jews and the Gentiles. We all have the opportunity to be his children. And it's all about becoming like him, that family piece of things. As I said, it's more than just saying it. It's the actual becoming like my Father. That's the key when we talk about these things. Man.
A big danger I think we fall into is treating God as a break in case of emergency thing. When things are good, we don't have to focus. We don't have to focus on him. He hasn't called us as much as he loves us and he's there for us. He's called us to be like him, to be obedient, to be holy, like you said earlier. Be with him when it's not persuaded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is no greater relationship than this one that we're talking about. None. That's the danger. We put other relationships even close to it. This is the one. This is the relationship we're striving to have with him. That's what his desire is. And so when you think about him going forward, this is the point he makes. So he talks about him being holy. We understand that piece of it. Then he gets into in verse 17, if you address as Father the one who impartially judges according to each one's works, conduct yourselves in fear during the time of your stay on earth. We'll stop there for just a second. I love that last phrase. It sounds like a hotel motto. Time of your stay on earth. But that's the whole point he's making. Stop focusing on this life. You've got to stop focusing on this life. This kingdom that we're a part of is where my citizenship is. And a lot of people struggle with this. A lot of people struggle with this. When we talk about being a child of God, it is greater than anything else that we're going to talk about. That is the relationship we're talking about. And this is what your God looks like. He is an impartial judge. Did that subject come up in another book recently? Yeah, James. The same thing. How you're treating people. You need to be careful. Why? Because your God is an impartial judge. Let him be the judge. Here it's the same thing. He's an impartial judge, and guess how he's going to judge you? According to what? Your works. The things you choose to do. You know, that all that behavior we're talking about that you need to be holy in, he's going to judge you in that. It's not about anything else anymore. It's not about if you were born into a Jewish tribe or whatever the case may be. This is the idea of understanding who God is. He is impartial when it comes to this. And that time of your stay on earth, it's short. I don't care how long you live. It's short. And so we've got to understand that piece of it, that it's not about this life. A lot of people, it was Frank Walton that was here a number of years ago that held a meeting, and I'll always remember the phrase. He'll talk about, we focus so much on that dot on the line of eternity. We focus on our little dot, that Scott dot on the line of eternity. That time that I'm just here is the most important thing that I focus on instead of my soul, the eternal life that we have. And we so much forget that. It's the idea, and you'll hear people talk about, if you go to a beautiful painting and you go up and you just put your face right up on the painting, you're not going to see the beauty of it. But God knows the whole tapestry. He knows the whole painting. We tend to focus on that one little dot rather than seeing the whole bigger picture that God sees. It doesn't mean I understand the whole picture or even able to see the whole picture, but I trust the one who can is the key. And so when we're striving through this life, it's understanding the bigger picture. The word fear here is the idea of reverence or respect, meaning you understand who he is as a child of God. Doesn't mean you don't have fear. I mean, that's, especially if you don't have a relationship with him, you should be fearful. But the reality for us, and from this standpoint, is just truly understanding who he is and that you're going to be judged based on what you've done in this life, the good or the bad. And then it goes on in verse 18 and adds to this. I guess I should have clicked this. There you go. But he goes on and he talks about the redeemed piece in verse 18. Knowing that you were not redeemed with perishable things like silver or gold from your futile way of life inherited from your forefathers, but with precious blood as a lamb unblemished and spotless, the blood of Christ. He talked about the word precious being used here. You see this here. But that word redeemed is unbelievably important. You were bought, or there was a price that was paid for freedom. This word will be used in the Old Testament from the standpoint of slaves, as an example. There's times it's going to be used throughout the scriptures. You see this. The understanding of ransom. We understand that word. There's a ransom that's paid. You know what the problem is that we struggle with, though, with this? I don't think that I needed to be bought back. I don't understand what I did in order for me to have to be bought back. Because the choices that we make sometimes, we don't view them to be horrible things. And God says, oh yeah, they are. You chose self over him. You chose to sin. And I had to send my son to die for that. I bought you back. We have got to understand how lost we were. What we were as his enemy, as Romans 5 will talk about. And that he paid this ransom that, by the way, no one else could pay. No one could pay. And so understanding that piece is so important. And that freedom part's going to come up later on in this book as well. How we use it is so important. But he goes on here, and he talks about this price that was paid. One of the things that can be difficult sometimes, especially if you've been a Christian for a long time, is what we're going to do during the worship service and partaking of the Lord's Supper. That it just becomes routine of what I do. And that's really sad if that's the case. I've been there. But if you don't take a step back and understand the price that was paid and why you partake of that Lord's Supper, you really need to work on your relationship with God. That's the point he's making here. It wasn't gold or silver that was paid. And I love how he says it in verse 18, in comparison to what Jesus did for us, the word futile, how you'd like to pronounce it, is used here. I mean, it's the word useless. That inheritance that your family gave you is useless compared to the blood of Jesus Christ. And understanding how precious that blood is. And what was willing to be offered to you simply for us to have the choice. That's the importance of the Lord's Supper. That's why it should never be, oh yeah, I forgot we're supposed to take the Lord's Supper today. That's the amazing thing to me, is that you can look around, and I've looked around and you see people smiling and laughing. I'm like, what are you laughing at? It's the Lord's Supper. We're remembering the Lord's death for you. It's unbelievable. But that's the relationship, shows the relationship we have with him. What price was paid? The blood of the Son of God was offered for you and for me. That's what, hopefully you're seeing this as we go through this, and I probably should have kept saying it. The temporary versus the eternal piece here, the spiritual versus the physical part that we're talking about, is the tremendous motivator we're absolutely discussing. And it's so important to be reminded of that. The understanding that this is about him and what he has done for us. Am I willing to suffer? Well, he suffered for you is the point that we're getting to. He suffered for you. Am I willing to go through this life and the difficulties of it? That's up to you. That's up to you. But this is what he did for you. This is the choice that he made for us. You get to choose, or I get to choose whether or not we're going to follow it. And that's the amazing thing of these next verses. That's the plan. That was his plan. Verse 20. For he was foreknown, as Jesus, before the foundation of the world, but has appeared in these last times for the sake of you, who through him are believers in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope are in God. This was the plan the whole time. Jesus was there. We know that. And he came and he died for us. This precious blood that was given so that those, and as my version wants to talk about, believers in God, is the idea of trusting him. Those that trust in God, where am I? And the one who raised him from the dead, in verse 21, and gave him glory so that your faith and hope are in God. What he was willing to go through for us should motivate us to trust in him. He was willing to send his son to die for us. He's going to do anything for us. He's willing to do everything for us. But he doesn't take away free will. That's your choice that we're going to make. So we need to make sure that we're trusting in him. And if we're trusting in him, it's always going to be about our faith and hope. So these words in particular that we're talking about up here in 20 and 21 are so important when it comes to this book and obviously the Bible itself for us to understand. I'm going to trust in God no matter what. It's not about the circumstance I'm in. I trust him. Then whatever the circumstance that comes my way, I trust him. I have faith in him. Do I understand what's going to happen? No. But I understand the one and know the one who has all power, and so I'm going to trust him. Am I going to hope in him? Am I really living and understanding the greater things, the eternal things? That's the idea that we're talking about. And as we're going to pick up on Wednesday, discussing a little bit more, to truly understand that part. And I want to leave you with this, and we'll get into this on Wednesday, because I think this is so powerful. You want to understand the word fervently that's used here in verse 22. He says, since you have in obedience to the truth purified your souls for a sincere love of the brethren, fervently love one another from the heart. That word fervently is only used 2 other times, and it's both times about prayer. One was about when Peter was about to die, and the other one is describing your Messiah, your Christ, your Savior in the garden when he fervently prayed. You think about that word. That's the love that we are to have for one another. Why can I have that kind of love? Because of Jesus Christ. That's the kind of love we are to have for one another. Not, I kind of like them. This is a true, fervent, sincere love that we have for one another. That's how people can know that you're my disciple if you love one another. It's understanding that relationship. I love my family at West Mason, God's children, because of my Savior. That's the attitude we need to have. We grow closer to one another because we have a relationship with him. That's the point. So when we talk about growing close to one another, talking to one, it's not about any of the nonsense we come up with, excuses why we don't. This is about my relationship with Jesus and growing closer to one another. And so we're going to pick up here on Wednesday, because this part is what's going to help us get through the difficulties of life. Obviously, God is there, but it's awesome to know that I have a family that's here to help me go through them as well. And so that's what we'll pick up on Wednesday. Thank you.